A corn rally after the USDA report and major losses in Brazilian livestock. We are going to comment that with Jerry Gidel, who is ready, right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Jerry, how are you today? So, tell us about the corn stockpiles. I think that was the major thing in today's USDA.
Yes, they uh, decreased old crop carryover stock today because the USDA in the month of May always ends up updating the old crop things, but they also start the 2000 or new crop 2024-25 expectations, and things kind of tightened up there quite dramatically from where, geez, a couple months ago, the February numbers they were 2.5 million carryover stock for the coming year. Now we're down to 2.1. Part of it's because we actually had less corn plantings than the USDA thought back in the winter time. We've also had some pretty decent, or I'd have to say stronger, uh, expectations, both in the domestic markets here from the standpoint that ethanol has been running pretty good. I know this month right here in April has been a little slow, but that's a seasonal thing. Last month where they were trying to slow down their uh, needs and get their updated maintenance done and things like that. But I think the boy from May through August here, I think we're going to be running in very good shape, and I think that's what the USDA did. Also, in the export world, uh, interestingly enough, they did make some adjustments in production in South America, but they're very modest at this point. But I do think that their 50 million increase in exports is not an outrageous situation. That 100 million, though, was carried into the new crop. And then we ended up having the USDA also increasing the feed demand. Well, from this year, they did take them down from some of their original expectations at 5.8 down to 5.75. But on the export side, they increased their exports for the coming year to 2.2 from 2.15. Overall, we came in with a number of 2.1 billion. That is, as you just mentioned, those early ideas here on this year was 2.5, so that's 400 million. Now, is that outrageously bullish? No, but I think it also uh, really means that our upcoming planting season here for corn, and we're in the midst of it right now. Last week's numbers were disappointing on the progress. We've had some more rains, spotty as they might be. There might not be heavy rains like they were down in Rio Grande do Sul that potentially uh, could reduce their output down there. But that was at harvest time. This is trying to get in the ground. And you really want to end up having U.S. corn plantings, 60% or more, even preferably closer to 70% by May 15th, because then you're getting most of your production out away from some of the hottest temperatures there in July when you have pollination and also filling, things like that. Well, if we don't get it right now, we were at 35% or something like that, 37% last week. It's going to be interesting because I don't think we're going to have a number coming up this coming week that's going to be anywhere close to 60% or higher. And so I think that's the real interesting twist as we go forward. The wheat market also found some good strength today from the standpoint that the market didn't see a lot of changes in old crop, but they did increase exports by 10 million on wheat for old crop US for along the way. But I think the interesting twist they decided to uh, reduce their harvested areas here on wheat. And interestingly enough, it's a combination of both hard red and soft red. I wasn't really anticipating big changes in soft red, but this winter weather out here has probably caused some issues where there's been too much moisture and drowned outs of all things east of the Mississippi, and that. And I think that's part of the reason why we saw reduced harvested acres. But interestingly enough, the overall U.S. wheat crop is crop conditions particularly have been quite erratic, to say the least. Wheat and values and crop conditions in both Kansas and Oklahoma have drifted down here this spring. Texas stayed about the same, but the interesting thing was that I mentioned those Eastern Corn Belt soft red issues have not been sparkling either. From there, 766 million, it's slightly up from this year's 688. But I think the real key thing is that there's lots of issues around the world. Russia has got dryness. We've had two shots of freeze over there, and that's part of the reason we sparked up midweek here. And there's some forecasts of again this weekend, early next week on wheat. So the USDA had their initial number for Russia, by the way, at 88 million. The most recent one I've seen coming out of Russia was at 91. Maybe it was at 90 from there. So the Russians always want to talk about how great their crops are. Sometimes they're not. And so we'll see how that turns out to be the case between the freeze and also some dryness in that part of the world from there. And also the U.S. situation too here on our crop size is not going crazy here at this point. Still under 1.9 million versus last year's 1.81. So that's 90 million, but that's not crazy from there. But the wheat market is back up towards its recent highs this week. We'll have to see how the weather in the Southwest turns out. At this point, if we don't see a lot of moisture, that market could still be quite explosive as we look forward here. And the final scenario here, of course, is soybeans. The soybean numbers today kind of disappointing from my point of view. I kind of felt like that they were going to readjust their carryover stocks with expanded U.S. crush of 25 or 50 million because it's been running very well. There's still a big concern that all of a sudden the soybean oil situation, which has been really clogged down with a whole huge advantage of the Chinese dumping a whole bunch of their secondary oil into the U.S. has really limited the soybean oil demand. And so that has been a factor, no doubt about that. But it has more to do with the fact that there's no place we need to get the soybean oil out of the storage out there so you make room for expanded crush, which I think would be there, but isn't the case. So oat crop didn't change here on the USDA's numbers. And then on the USDA's new crop numbers, which is always the one that the world wants to keep an eye on it, and that they left them at 52. I already mentioned that they'd already kept U.S. corn yields at 181 and that, but it's going to be quite interesting here as we go forward. They on the demand side for the soybeans for the coming year, the one twist of it is that they took 25 million, or excuse me, 50 million out of demand on soybeans, down from 1.825 from their initial expectations on the winter of 1.875. But I'm not totally sure where if there's issues down in Rio Grande about wet weather that could be spoiling the last of their crop, which is what the trade has been looking at. The USDA did end up taking 2 million metric tons out of Brazil's numbers, but I kind of still feel like that number could
Well,
still
that
be
I think that there should be an additional, at least an additional 1 million metric ton in cuts from the Brazilian crop, considering all the floods in the south.
Oh, I totally agree that the USDA's 153 really didn't hit the mark, and I kind of feel there's other issues. We'd be a hell lot closer to 150, but that wasn't our number today. And so the that twist of taking it out of exports didn't make a lot of sense to me, but it put a number over 400 million metric tons, and that's the reason why it took all day for beans to rally, and they didn't really go very far. And it's going to be something that's going to be interesting because we just mentioned about the fact that corn's seedings in the U.S. was getting a little postponed and delayed. Well, that's the same situation that could happen in beans. Now, it's not as crucial on bean yields and timing as much as it is on corn, but once you get past June 1st on either one of these crops in the U.S., and we're not June 1st by any means, but we're going to have to turn this around. All we keep doing is getting rain every 2 to 3 days. Someplace in the Midwest in a constant battle. And we had three chances this week. I got some more rains tonight in my backyard, and I've also got rains Monday night and Tuesday. You just never dry out, so you can get these big equipment out there to get these things planted. So it's going to be an interesting factor as we stare into next week on the twist of that, by the way, don't forget is if we can't plant the corn, that means it's going to have a chance to plant more beans later. So beans are still going to have a struggle here going back up to the recent highs early this week. I think that's really going to be a cap in those prices looking forward.
Yes, and one of the things that I wanted to mention in the program is that the major floods affecting my state of Rio Grande do Sul will have a significant impact on livestock because many of the hog and poultry production areas in the surroundings of the urban areas will have several losses that are not counted yet, and that will affect the hog and poultry this time at this time.
Exactly, because we both know that Brazil is a prominent world exporter of meats, and a lot of that's based in both the Rio Grande and Paraná. Not as much of that growing up in Mato Grosso and the northern provinces and that. But that's the thing is interesting. We're potentially it hurts some of the internal demand. There's no doubt about that because of loss of numbers and that. But at the same time, it's also reduces competition potentially out of the world export meat markets, and that could be supportive in the U.S. side of this thing. So it's always a delicate balance to see how that all works out. But it's definitely something to note that it was a tough. Oh, geez, I don't know what you want to call it here. Last 2 or 3 weeks in southern Brazil, and it's as always, there doesn't seem to be the respect of what happened down there. We're talking about 25 inches in 10 days in some of those areas down there. That's wicked. That's just
And
tough.
even without any evacuation plan, nothing of that. So
Right. Yeah, the humans can crawl up the tree, but it's not much easier for the chickens and the pork. And even cattle at this point. You got a few feet in between, but that's really kind of a cruel situation to say the least from there because it just constantly kept going. And once you got it wet, you couldn't get in there to take it out of there. What do
and
you
more,
do?
yeah,
It was
and
ugly.
more rain than expected for this weekend.
Oh yeah. Well, that's the same thing as popping around up around here in this world too.
So
But
when do you expect soybeans to go up again?
I think they might struggle a little bit here in the idea that things are progressing slowly here in the plantings. But the biggest problem is going to be is that the soybean side of things is going to also, as we get more issues in plantings and when we finally get some better numbers from the USDA, I continue to be surprised by their reluctance to impact some previous issues in soybeans in the South America. The biggest problem is that they came through and had to increase the number last fall or last winter because the crop size was the exports were too bigger. That's what's, I think, frustrating them. So now at this point, they don't want to take these down. But there's been a lot of issues of heat and replants and other things in Brazil, and even now in Brazil, we've had this issues, not so much directly towards beans, but we had the stunt situation on corn. That's another feature in this thing that there's been such a reluctance. We got 2 million decline in the output from excuse me in Brazil and Argentina, and that on corn. And then beans, we only went down 1 million on beans from 55 down to 154, and they left Argentina beans at 50. I don't know. That's the part that's going to be interesting when we finally get some of this all stuff sorted out. But that's right now, at least the next week's situations. I think the July corn at this point is run up really close to a breakout point on things from there. And so we're looking at the 472 value here on July corn. That's kind of, we snuck up underneath it, and it looks like that could be an interesting one that could open up a quick push to 485 to 490. That should be an opportunity to add some more corn sales if that occurs. On the bean side, or excuse me, the wheat side here at this point, that one's also very interesting at this point. It's going to have to be tied in with dryness in the Southwest, but that number is technically we could get another batch of technical buying if we can get above 666 in Chicago wheat from there, and that could open up a chance for a push into the 680 to $7 range in a pretty quick order there. Soybeans, as we just mentioned earlier here, they're going to have some strength with issues on not getting stuff planted, but it's also going to create an idea that we're going to plant more soybeans than anticipated. So in that case, we're going to end up maybe having difficulty with the recent highs here at 1250 to 1260 values. So keep that in mind on rallies this coming week. That might be also a place that we to make some, if you missed some sales we talked about previously, that might be a place to get back up into that 70% side.
All right. Thank you very much, Jerry. See you next time.
Yes.